How are they evaluating AI fluency, and how has that changed over the last 12 months or even the last month?
When I hear people like, I want to hire a builder, I'm kind of like, okay, cool. But what's the question behind the question? Is it, can you do more with less? Can you fly low and high? Or can you actually implement AI tooling? I don't think people actually know what the question behind the question is.
Welcome to Human First, the go-to-market hiring show. I'm your host, Danielle Parker, head of marketing at Captivate Talent. The question of what AI fluency actually means in a go-to-market hire is one we hear constantly from founders, revenue leaders, VCs trying to advise their portfolios. Everyone's asking about it, but very few people have been stress testing the real answers at scale. But today's guest is one of them. Andy Mowat is the founder of Whispered, an AI platform helping top executives find their next role, and someone who has spent the last year in constant conversation with senior go-to-market leaders about how AI is reshaping the way they hire and get hired. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to have one of these conversations filmed live because we've been talking back and forth for so long on Slack and kind of just really sharing, the meaning of the mind. So I'm just going to jump right into it, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
All right. So you have this great podcast, and you've also spent the last year interviewing the top go-to-market executives about how they find and vet and attract talent. And what's the one shift in those conversations that has surprised you the most, recently or over the last year?
Yeah, maybe I'll give like 3 or 4 kind of meta observations, but it's been fun. Like,
Yeah,
I
let's
think
do it.
I think top executives, nobody is like born as a great interviewer. I think you can learn it. And so I think a lot of people, we always ask at the end, like, how did you get good at interviewing? And I think it's a lot of just repetition and practice. And so the sooner you kind of move into that, even if you're an IC, just being on the panels and starting to learn is great. I'd say references and backdoor references are a bigger deal than people realize. My favorite quote was from Nick Mehta, where he said, I backdoor people before I fall in love with them. We've seen some people backdooring people, but the really aggressive people will backdoor people before they even get into the funnel, right? There's all the CEO network where they're all chatting together, where they will text each other of like, hey, is this person good or not? And so I think almost everybody has an opinion on references. I think there's a lot of wildly divergent views on interview process. I think one thing that we've been delving a lot into over the last 30 or 40 episodes is, how do you think about builders and AI fluency? That's definitely a topic that is, I think everyone knows they need to think about it, but very few people know how to evaluate it.
Yeah, you just teed up the next thought I had. And again, something we've talked about at length and have produced content on together. But
yes.
How are you seeing the way hiring managers or even, these executives when they're evaluating, how are they evaluating AI fluency, and how has that changed over the last 12 months or even the last month? Because we were just saying the content we produced together is already out of date. And that was from 4 months ago, last fall. And what does the conversation look like now compared to where it started?
Yeah. I think 12 months ago or 18 months ago, being AI curious and playing around with ChatGPT and kind of using it to soundboard your ideas was sufficient. Now you need, no matter at what level you're at, you're probably, unless it's an older school company or something like that, the expectation is going to be that you understand and have built in AI. And I think that's for people, I talk to a lot of people, and crossing that Claude code hurdle is hard. Wade at Zapier was great. We talked to him, and obviously they are an AI forward thinking. Very early, they realized that AI could fundamentally change their business. And so he talked a lot about how he used to just ask people, hey, tell me about your AI. And people would waddle and wander. I think now they actually test for it in the interview process, which is really impressive. I heard, for me, the questions I ask of people, maybe one click below me, but I think it's starting to filter up. It used to be, I would ask executives 3 or 4 years ago, can you pull your own data? That was kind of my proxy for, you're not sitting there waiting for some team to show up and do your data for you. You can explore and ask questions. And I think that was something that even before AI, I was asking for. Now, I heard this question from somebody, I think it was on our podcast, where they said, if you can't point to your GitHub repository, I am going to question your AI skill set. And I think it's actually, I remember when I was like 20 years ago, somebody's like, hey, you need 1,000 LinkedIn connections for me to even talk to you. And I was like, God, that's so pompous. And then I was like, okay, I understand, right? And I think similarly over the last 4 months, I have crossed that barrier myself where I'm coding, shipping apps, using Claude Code. And I know what GitHub is. I know how to pull, I
Yeah.
know how to pull, I know what deployments are. I understand all this stuff. And so it is a foreign language. It's very difficult to get across the hurdle. Happy to even go a little bit tactical in terms of how people do. But I think that's where I'm seeing it go. I'm seeing more and more senior executives go into interview with CEOs. And one of the top questions on them is, great, I know you can lead, but can you tell me what you have built in AI? It's a very scary question if you don't know the answer. And I think a lot of people will be like, well, I'm using Gamma, or I'm using some of these tools to create decks. It's not enough. One of our whispered members that graduated, she came into one of our, every week we have kind of huddles where we talk about tactics that people learning. And I think a big question that a lot of companies have is like, are you a builder? And so most people, when they get the exercise, and by the way, we've talked a lot about exercises on our podcast with people. When you get the exercise, you'll take it, you'll manipulate it with ChatGPT, you'll get your ideas, and you'll form a nice deck. That's 9 months ago. What she did that was massively impressive was she basically said, okay, here's the data set. I could analyze it and put it in slides, but she actually built a dashboard where she could show them online, and everyone's like, oh my God, that's great. Like, can you give us the dashboard and the leave behind? And so that's kind of how fast this is moving, where you need to demonstrate in the interview process that you are a builder in AI and understand it. Now, you don't need to, as an executive, to be building every day, but damn, you need to be deep into it. So if you take that, can you pull your own data analogy, take that to AI, and you need to be able to have that fluency to be a part of the discussions around AI.
Yeah. And I think something super important is even understanding like the scope of what's possible with it. Because if you don't have that knowledge, then you can't, even filter that down to your team of like knowing like, hey, we can actually pull in all of this data and then create this process. And if you're just still in like the ChatGPT, like custom GPTs, like you're still going to have to like upload all the transcripts manually and like do it that way. So I think, yeah, it's evolving so rapidly.
Yeah. One thing I'd say on that is I've had this unique position, whereas like I've run RevOps at 4 unicorns, but for the last year, I've been out building my own startup all on top of AI. And I think if you're in a company, it's actually quite hard to get the data access, get the permissions, and then have an idea of what you can build. And so within a company of any size, call it like greater than 25 million, it's actually quite hard to find a project that you can drive and show and demonstrate value on with AI. And so, I think it's okay to, like, the first project I did in AI was like a personal website, and
Mm-hmm.
it used to have taken me months, and now it took me 5 hours. And what you really have to have is like this creativity and curiosity to just keep banging at things and trying things. And so I think it is like every one of these people on this podcast is going to have to get themselves over that hurdle. I think the question from interviewers is a very challenging question for a lot of people because they just actually haven't had those opportunities within corporate environments yet to do that in most cases. And so I've created this thing called GTM Council. We have the 100 top VPs of RevOps. In theory, they would be at the confluence of this stuff, but they're all still figuring it out as well too. And it's like AI will come, AI will fundamentally change GTM, but I think it's over the next 2 years. But you can either be laggard or you can be at the forefront of that.
Yeah, I think like we said at the beginning of this, like it's changing not even, year to year, it's month over month now of what's possible and what you're doing. And my introduction to AI was very much like, it felt like playing, where it was like, oh, I'm going to take this course from Nat Eliason because I follow him on Twitter and like I like structure and like now I built a Pomodoro timer in Cursor and how does that like play out? And then it's like, hey, I could probably use this for business. So I think The other part is like, you're right, that curiosity of like, what can you build personally? Again, if you have all those hurdles of getting, multi levels of data access, but like, that's a good way to just see the capabilities and get some concrete experience on your own.
Yeah. I mean, I almost feel like I want to start a podcast, which is like interviewing people of like, how did you cross the chasm? Because it's hard and it's interesting and it's challenging. I'm going to write a whole like little handbook on how to cross the chasm because I think it's important and a lot of people don't understand. You almost need a mentor or a sounding board or
That's why I took the
somebody that
course, because I was like, okay, there's just too much. I trust him. Like, I'm just going to go on it. And then I figured out how to get transcripts into GitHub automatically and then pull from that. And it was truly like life changing.
that is amazing. You've crossed the chasm.
Yeah, if you have a GitHub, I guess. So on that question, like when you yourself are talking to these executives who are really strong in this, like you would call them AI fluent. What does that actually look like in their day to day? Like, how do they speak? How do they describe it when they're asked?
People are systems thinkers. It's like I'm lucky because a lot of my peer group is rockstar RevOps people, right? Like we've got a person in Whisper now who's run RevOps at a couple unicorns, and this person is building their entire CRM for their job search in AI at the same time they're doing it, right? Like I think everyone
Yeah.
they're not sitting back and waiting for the world to come to them. They're like thinking aggressively and thinking in systems and processes, which is why it's nice. Like all the, I am hearing from a lot of VC talent teams right now that RevOps is that like bridge for every company to get AI fluent in GTM, right? Like these people are the people that are configurers, systems thinkers, tinkerers. And so there are some roles in GTM that are really struggling right now. I think RevOps is changing, but will be massively in demand for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And that like echoes what we're seeing in terms of the requirements for certain RevOps roles and how rapidly those have changed even over the last like quarter or so, and how much more important that ability to demonstrate AI fluency in terms of what you've built is to our clients who are hiring.
I would love it. A quick shout out for Bree at Captivate. I've known Bree.
I didn't pay him for this, I promise.
No. I've been friends with Bree for years, even before she joined Captivate. And when she did, I was like, "That's awesome," because you're joining Chris Gannon and folks like that. But yeah, I think there are three great RevOps recruiters. Bree is one of them who really understands the function.
Can't wait to Slack Bree this after. She's going to be so excited. Yeah, but
Yeah.
she's fantastic. I love her. So I think on the flip side of that, like, what are the most common ways people are overselling their capabilities in the hiring process? Oh yeah, are we going to get spicy?
This is a fun one. I don't think people realize they're overselling it. I think they feel like they're geniuses. There's three tabs on Anthropic, probably similar on OpenAI. There's Claude, there's Cowork, and then there's Claude Code. I think very few people have actually bothered to tab over to them. And so I think this technology is moving so fast that we all think we're geniuses. But the reality is like building a slide deck in this stuff is old school stuff. Ideating your ideas and spitting them out, like building a graphic in it is like not revolutionary stuff. That was revolutionary 2 years ago. And so I think a lot of people show up and they don't think they're overselling, but they are. On the pre-AI, I would always, when I'm talking to somebody about technical chops, my favorite thing is to find a topic that they're comfortable with, because then they let me in and I can drill as deeply as possible, right? Like I had one person and I was interviewing them. I won't, but I was interviewing them and I asked them, I'm going to name three topics. Topic A, topic B, topic C. And you pick one and then I'll drill deep. And they picked one and I was like, interesting choice. And I asked one question and they were stumped, right? So I think it's interesting too, because CEOs, if they're going to interview on this, or CROs, also need to cross the chasm, because you can't dive deep to ask these questions if you don't understand them yourself. And so that's going to be very interesting. I think, the classic question is, tell me what you built in AI. But I'm curious how many people asking that question actually know how to go deep down the rabbit hole. And so I think we're at this really awkward phase where everyone's still figuring it out. And if you really have figured it out, you are going to blow people away.
Yeah, that's funny. We were chatting with Kyle Norton at Owner, who I know you've spoken with as well, and I asked him, a similar question of like, how do you know? And he's like, there's just this feeling because I have to get them to stop talking about what they're building, and it's all sounds familiar, and it's like you're just with someone who like gets it.
I think so. I also think a lot about like there is a I mean, I spend a lot of time just because I love helping people on careers, and we're helping tons of VP and C
You
level
do,
people
it's
through
true. You're
GTM.
a
Yeah,
great
yeah, yeah.
helper. And I would add like within the leadership, like that level of craft too. I mean, I'm a marketer, so like, I have strong opinions about that in terms of how AI impacts marketing versus like a role like RevOps or engineering.
Yeah.
But like the
Yeah.
actual craft of it too, I think is so important. Being able to like see that 30,000 foot view versus just like every day of like, cool, we did this thing and like, but what, like we built this thing and it's like producing all this output, but like, what is it actually doing for the brand and the business?
Yeah, I'm pulling up one question we have in our podcast, which is you just nailed on it, right? Like when I hear people like, I want to hire a builder, I'm kind of like, okay, cool. But what's the question behind the question? Is it, can you do more with less? Can you fly low and high? Or can you actually implement AI tooling? And I don't think people actually know what the question behind the question is. They just know they need to hire a builder. And
Mm-hmm.
so like, I think you're exactly right. Like marketing, yes, marketing teams are collapsing, right? Like you no longer need a design team. We just got rid of our EA that was producing podcast clips. We just got rid of our UX designer. Those are all being done with AI now. You no longer need, you can have like a person that you can set up creative, and then you can have your brand guidelines, and you can be done. And so instead of like a production line of people, you can have one person that does that. But that's where the savviness of marketing and messaging and understanding personas is even more important, right? And so I think if I were to do it, I'd be saying I need a person or a small team that's really driving GTM transformation with AI, and it's equipping all these people to be able to do this.
Yeah. And it's like, it's giving them the time to do the things that the role requires that are like those human touches, like building relationships and getting face to face and like actually having those conversations. And like AI kind of helps like open up that time, at least
Yes.
for me.
Yes.
Um, so let's talk about Whispered a little bit. Like Whispered exists to surface unposted roles, help executives navigate their careers more strategically. How are you seeing AI fluency change what kinds of roles are available? Like we've talked about that, like marketing teams are collapsing, or what executives are even being approached for. Like, what are you hearing being whispered, if you will?
The biggest change I see is enablement is fundamentally going to change. I've been spending a lot of time with a company called Hyperbound, which is really driving like changes in AI role plays, right? So instead of training where historically the trainers are from a teaching background, or maybe they've been a salesperson and their job is like take what's being released or what the CEO says and do standardized training. I think the AI role plays that Hyperbound is driving is the vision much more is it's going to be personalized for you, and you're going to practice until you nail it. And if you can't get over that hump, like we will know. And so I think that will really improve management training. And I think there's a lot of efficiencies you can drive with AI, and people are spending more time on calls, less time on the busy work. And then
Exactly.
RevOps is the key to being able to make that all work, but the role will be very different in 2 years than it is right now. And so I think that's some of the changes in the core for GTM functions that I'm seeing.
Yeah, so let's dig into RevOps a little bit. Like, what do you think that role is going to look like in 2 years? How do you think it'll change team structure and what kind of roles are available and what the skills are required?
Yeah, it's a lot of what I spend a third of my time on with GTM Council. We've got the top 100 people, and we're interviewing people every week, just understanding it, which is a really great place to be. I think the core foundational systems will change. I think the idea of a crappy UX with a clunky system like Salesforce will fundamentally change. And I'm spending a lot of time with the vendors there. I think marketing automation, like I have a ton of friends that are looking to churn off of Marketo, and this cool company called Inflection.io is starting to fundamentally rethink marketing automation in a AI first world. And so I've been
Yeah.
spending a lot of time with them. Um, as I said, enablement, I think, is going to change. I think the fundamental roles of, your question was around how RevOps changes. But I think RevOps you'll see the stack kind of fundamentally turn over. I think it'll probably, it's a funny, we were actually debating this with Everett at Clay of like, do specialized solutions win out, or does a more of a builder platform like Clay win out? And I think I can see it going both ways, right? Like I spent time recently with the CEO of 11x, and the cool thing for them is like if you automate SDR, you think it's like data, it's deliverability, it's the sequencing and everything. And it's like you take 5 tools and you're collapsing it into one. And so I think that's a possible route. I also think that people are going to want to build their own stuff and customize their own UXs. And so I can see companies taking, you know, it's really interesting. I don't know which way it's going to go right now. And I'm talking to people that are going both directions.
Yeah. And like it might not just go one way. There might be kind of this schism of companies who are building one way versus another way. And like we just don't know yet.
Every time I hear of a company that churns off of Salesforce, I call my friend, I call whoever I know there, and I'm like, I want to understand the process, what you're going to, how you're thinking about it. And that part is really interesting for me. So I'm in it's been a blessing for me, which is like, I guess I saw 2 years ago that we were sitting with older tech and that this world in 2 to 3 years in GTM will change. It is not there. But there are people innovating and testing on it, but we're still in like the bronze age, maybe is what I would say in this. And so RevOps teams are at the front of this, of figuring out how to drive these efficiencies.
So we're going to get a little bit more tactical, I think, one of the things I want people to be able to take away listening to this episode. So for like a senior go-to-market leader right now, say you're coaching them, they know they need to get more serious about AI, but they have no idea where to begin. Like, what would you tell them to do in the next 30 days? How would you help them get cross the chasm, or at least get a little closer to looking over it?
I have a paper that I'm writing it up. I haven't finished it yet, so let me take a look at it.
I also love that you still handwrite, because I do too. Like I still handwrite most of the things that I do.
I find that it helps me listen to people better when I'm on calls. By writing down, I shut up and listen, which I'm maybe not as good at. Okay, so I think you got to download Claude, and it's going to be a very frustrating couple weeks, but you have to figure out how to get a GitHub account, and you have to figure out how to make the two of those work together, and you have to come up with something that you want to ship. It's helpful if you're building a business or you're hacking something, because you can come up with something, but it could be something in your personal life, right? And it's like, I think Lovable is a good first step, because you can build little apps and you can do everything, and everything's kind of constrained. All the deployment and the doing and the pushing is all within Lovable, and it all kind of works as one. But if you want to be able to do more complex apps that are passing things back and forth, I think you're going to need to get to something like a Claude Code. Personally, I kind of jumped straight from Claude to Claude Code, and I skipped the co-work. I was debating with somebody the other day, which is like a lot of that stuff just feels like busy work, right? Like scan my email and tell me what to do and things like that. Like I'm fairly organized, so I haven't been able to find any co-work projects to do, but I think I've been able to find lots of Claude Code projects to do. Maybe it's because I'm building a business and I've building websites, building apps, but I've been able to cross over that barrier. Ideally, you have a sounding board for people and this has been helpful for me in my career 4 or 5 times. I've got 2 CEOs that even before AI, I would code up things. And I remember when I was building my startup Gated, I was like, I've built V1 in Zapier and I'm stuck. And I've got 5 people using it, but it won't scale. And so I called up a friend and he's like, well, meet Airtable and here's how to set it up. And he spent an hour with me and I'm like, amazing. And so then now Airtable's rolled out a lot of AI where you can build a lot of stuff. And so I think it's like having a person you can call who can get you unstuck until you can get to the place where you can kind of just experiment with yourself. I do think there's also like, you just ask Claude, what do I do? And it
Yeah.
tells you and it coaches you through it. And it's ugly and it's messy and you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, but you do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's that like honestly that resonates with me a lot because that's how I started experimenting. Like I said, I had brought up the Nat Eliason course, not sponsored, not I don't have any affiliate code, but I think it was like $500 and it was about it was specifically on like Cursor, but I think it still applies to Claude Code now, especially more so because this was like a year ago that it came out, but it walked through like setting up the GitHub and connecting everything and also like the higher level concepts behind that. And you get to just like practice with like this thing in mind that I was like, okay, I don't have to decide what to build. It's telling me to like literally build a Pomodoro timer first. That's like just this basic app, play with the branding, and then it kind of moves on to something more complex where you need like a database, like an Airtable or a Supabase or something like that. And then it kind of builds you up to those more complex things. And then something else that's been super helpful for me as, you know, someone in go to market was like, I just posted on LinkedIn and was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I feel like a lot of us feel that way. Like, let's chat. And now, like, on Tuesdays, I have a little group of marketers where we just like basically shoot the shit about AI and like what we're building and how we're using it and who we're learning from. And like, that's immensely helpful. Like, that is how I figured out how to get those transcripts into GitHub and then just like chat with them via Claude or Cursor and build skills and things like that.
I'm so impressed. Yeah, you've gone. I think it's interesting because not everybody ticks this way. You know, not everybody is a builder, a creator, a tinkerer. You are. But if you even just break down marketing, I always think there's brand marketers, there are product marketing, and then there's more demand gen. Which of the three would you call yourself?
Honestly, like, this is going to sound so squishy, but like brand,
Okay.
which is
Yeah, which
like,
is amazing because you brand people, you would assume that like they're the feel and the vibe, but you've figured out how to get there. But I do think there are going to be people that are just like, that ain't me. And I, what would I give? What would advice would I give to those people? Find a friend who is that, and you know, be able to ask them questions and can keep. You can still tinker and get there, right? Like the world is going to be where you are gonna need agents, right? Like and you're as brand, it may be different than demand gen and. So I feel like the weird thing is everyone's going to have to get there. I mean, maybe the analogy would be like the computer, right? I remember like
yeah.
my grandmother's like, she's like, I don't use that stuff. I'm not touching that. And I think everybody now uses it and touches it. And some people got there a little faster and some people got there a little bit slower. But, you know, AI is just kind of the next computer.
Yeah. And I think like even for me, what was really helpful was just like breaking it down to like, okay, I'm going to do this one concrete thing and figure it out versus like, oh my God, I have to learn AI, which like then my brain's like, what does that mean? Like I have to learn coding and this and that and that and all these tools and where do I start? And just breaking it down into something tactical. Like I'm going to build this one tiny thing and figure out how to do it.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. Like, I guess I and a lot of people then the tick like me had a head start because this is what we do with RevOps is tinker and configure and keep figuring it out until you can plug it in. I think people coming from different functions may have a little bit more time, but they're going to have to get there.
And do you think that that's something like inherently ingrained or a skill that you can learn? Like it's, you know, to use a buzzword, it's very high agency. And like I'm thinking back, I'm like the first time I tried to play with like HTML was when I had a MySpace, aging myself a little bit. And I wanted to figure out like the HTML to like change the background and stuff. And I just like figured it out. But like that's always been the way to do it. I've done it. But do you think it's like an inherently like learnable thing?
I do. I think this is where a lot of hiring managers have a bias towards younger people or better at figuring this out. And so I think you know, I just crossed over 50 and like I'm still tinkering and so I think you know, you've got one of the whisper members on one of our huddles said, you know, he's like, when I was 35 and I was CEO, you know, it wasn't about the age, it was about the mental flexibility and so if somebody would show up and say, I am running this playbook versus he's like, that would be because it was my company, I was very guarded and I wouldn't hire those people. And so I think you've got to be conscious of like you've still got to be open to new ideas and try new things, right? Like I think we've all seen our grandparents not want to try, like, check out the cool iPad. And they're like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do
Like,
that,
what
right?
is
You,
that?
you can't let yourself be one of those people.
Yeah. Although I will say the first time I FaceTimed my Nana and she saw it and was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can actually see you and talk to you. And like, I think that was like a good little moment for her, but that's just a little personal aside.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I think
we've talked
that
about,
was one thing
oh,
Steve
sorry.
Jobs did so well, right? Like the iPad was built for it. It was like computers used to be like 18 to 40, and then the iPad could, like, a 2-year-old could figure it out or an 80-year-old could figure it out. I don't think we've gotten there with AI yet, right? Like it's like, yeah, you can still have on to ChatGPT and just have a conversation with it, but like Claude Code is what I've been spending a lot of time with a lot of people that are kind of like, Andy, the world's changing fast. Here's what's happening. I think everyone admits that, like, it's not built for the average person yet, but in 3 or 4 months it will be. And so
Yeah.
a lot
We
of
don't have like the iPhone of AI yet.
yeah, well, like Danielle, you and me having to figure out GitHub and deployments and all this stuff, like that stuff should be easier. And somebody's gonna, like, whether it's Claude or whether it's OpenAI or somebody else, like,
My money's on Claude.
my money's on Claude too,
Yeah.
especially given their beautiful, like, moralistic stance. Shout out to them for that. I think somebody's gonna they got to make that stuff easier and make it integrated. Like, you shouldn't have to figure that stuff out, right? And it's shocking to me. And I think what I'm hearing is they see that stuff and they're going to get that figured out pretty quickly. So it's going to get easier
Yeah.
and easier.
Like you said, it's still like super early days. And like, did you see that graphic that was floating around recently? That was like the percentage of the general population that has even like touched AI versus like the people who like kind of know about it, maybe have done ChatGPT, and then the people who are like AI pilled was like, I think it was like maybe 12%. I'm probably totally messing this up, but I like forget that sometimes. Then I like come up for air with my friends who are not like in tech, and I'm just like, oh yeah, we're kind of in this little like first mover bubble still.
Yes. I mean, people need to realize this, which I'm hearing more and more from my peer group. Software is now free. Like,
Yes.
that doesn't mean you should go code your own CRM or your own call recording tool or your whatever, but you can figure out those little problems that are the little annoyances. It's going to be interesting. Like, if you say software is free, that could imply that everyone's going to build everything, but nobody should. And so, like, I think we're in this, like, everyone's figuring it out. Like, what should I build? What should I buy? I think the SaaS apocalypse is overstated, and that people won't vibe code a CRM and things like that.
No. Or they'll
But
do it for 30 days and then realize like this was a terrible idea. We're going back.
exactly, I'm sure there's a lot of things where people built and they're like, oh, do I now? I got to maintain it, and I got to update it, and it's like, oh, the code changed, and so I think we are all in a world where we're figuring this stuff out. But if you remember and you take that to heart, which is, I can build anything I can dream up, that becomes powerful and also means the world's really in a weird spot right now.
Yeah. A cool but weird spot for many reasons. Um, all right. We've talked about this at the beginning of the interview, so I would love to dig in a little bit more here on the traditional take-home case study
Yes.
being a less reliable signal in this AI world we've entered. So what should hiring managers be replacing it with? Like, what have you seen in your conversations? What does a stronger evaluation exercise look like?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about this on our Whispered Hiring podcast. I think increasingly, so maybe let me use an analogy. Like, I was early at Upwork. I used to before AI, I would post, hey, I need this person, and here are 3 specific questions. And I'd get, like, over a course of 3 weeks, 100 applications, of which 95 would not answer the questions I asked. So
Yep.
filtering became really easy. Now, if you apply this to the job market, this is happening everywhere, right? So everybody, like, and you're seeing it, and this is why roles are going more towards recruiters or whispered roles than they are for posted, because if you're a company and you post a job, you will, by the way, like with Upwork now, when I do it, I'll get like 100 amazing applications in 5 minutes.
And they're
And they all
perfect.
look perfect and they've all answered the questions, right? So this is why, like, companies that are posting roles are getting absolutely flooded. And it's harder and harder to separate the good from the bad because everyone's doing all the best practices. Like their cover letter speaks to the questions, their resume is personalized to the job. And so you're like, wow, this person's great. And then you're like, ugh. And so I think what that means is the whole hiring process is kind of broken. And so your choice is, whisper the role, which more and more companies are doing because they're like, I don't need 3,000 applications or hire a
Yeah.
recruiter or something like that. So that's kind of like the framing, I would say. Now, that was more around the top of funnel for hiring, which I think is fundamentally broken. Now you get to the later stage, the same thing's happening, right? It used to be that people would give a case study and you would take it and you would go home and you really put your thoughts around it. And you would like come back and present and people would be like, wow, deeply thoughtful. Now everybody takes it and just iterates on it with ChatGPT and then uses like a gamma or whatever to produce the deck. And then they show it and it's vanilla and it's hard to tell the difference. And so it's not separating the wheat from the chaff anymore. So I'm seeing kind of two or three approaches that executives are starting and talent teams are starting to use. I'd say one is screw the take home. Like we're going to just get you on a whiteboard and we're going to talk. Because it's fundamental. So that's one. Another person, I think last week that hasn't been published on our podcast said, I asked this question of like, are the exercises dead? And they're like, no, Andy, you still need to present it. And
demonstrate that you've
so
actually thought it.
yeah. So like, and so when you present it, we're going to see how well you present, how deeply you're thoughtful. I can still probe in. So that's one. I tend to be more on the like, let's just get you in a room and do it. I saw another woman we recorded the podcast that she's like, and I really like this idea. She lovabled something that would say, great, we are going to, when you're ready, push go. We will give you the prompt. And in 2 minutes, you will record your answer to this question. And I was like, so time-bound preparation, you can't use AI in those cases, which I thought was brilliant. I thought that was brilliant. And then the idea of, which I always like, is like, let's pick an area where you're comfortable and dive as deep as possible. I like these bullshit exercises of let me dump all my data and let me have you think it through. I think those are going away. And so if I were to do it, I would be like, bring in every deck, every GitHub, everything you got, and let's just talk for an hour and show me where you're at. And I want to understand that. And so I think it depends upon the level, right? If you're going for an executive, you probably still need the presentation of some type to make sure they can handle intensity and questioning and all that. But I think the fundamental idea, which most like, here's the reality, like everyone still is ChatGPTing the job descriptions. And I talked to a company today. They're like, we created 3 versions of a RevOps job. We've posted all 3. We'll just interview people and figure it out. I'm like, oof, that's not great. Call Bree, call me, we'll help you out. So that I think fails. And then similarly, like if you as a company are ChatGPTing or Clauding to create a BS case study because that's what you think you need, I think you're not doing a good job of evaluating the talent for what you think you want to evaluate them for.
Yeah, and honestly, that goes back to something you said earlier about like, what's the question behind the question? Like, what's the purpose behind the case study? Is it a box check of we just, this is part of a hiring process, we need to do it, so we're going to like ChatGPT and put something together? Or is it something super thoughtful where you're like, okay, I want to see how you think through X problem, or I want to see how you approach building something with AI. And I think stepping back and doing that.
Yeah, I think
helps
also
you get
like
it better.
we coach executives, which is, hey, when you get the exercise, that's a time to evaluate, do you want to go further in the process? Because every company's like, oh, don't spend more than an hour. Bullshit. Everyone spends 14 hours doing it because you're going to do a great job, or you're like, don't show up if you're not going to do good work. So if you're a company and you've got an A candidate, you may risk losing them by foisting a 14-hour project on them that you think only takes an hour because you're like, oh, don't spend much time on it. Well, it's like a great candidate, you want to spend a lot of time on it. So I would rethink that. Yeah. I would rethink it. And I've fought this, right? Like I've been at companies where like you must do an exercise or a case study. And hopefully those days are going away. But I would kind of be like, bring in your best work and let's just go through it, right? Like that, I want to do that. And it's like, and I think you're not going to lose the rock star candidates who are like, I'm not sure this one's the right thing. It may be the right thing, but like keep going down that road with us. So I think if I were companies, I would fundamentally rethink the case study. Like, I mean, we have Slacks every day and Whispered of like people like, oh, I got this case study. Like, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're particularly atrocious in marketing roles. I will say I've had my fair share, and I've been that candidate where I was just like, okay, you tell me not to spend more than an hour on it, and it's literally like design our entire, it was a very specific company in San Francisco, and it was literally like design our entire holiday campaign, including like all of the graphics, all of the copy, the strategy behind it, the emails. And I was just like, this is not to see how I think. Like, this is quite different from that.
Yeah, it is. It is something that I don't think a lot of people realize they need to fix, but they do.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think some people approach it as that like box check, like we were saying. All right, cool. I got like 2 more questions for you here. So let's get into it. You are building Whispered at a time when both the executive job market and the hiring process itself, like you said, is being shaped by AI. Like the top of funnel is broken, the case studies can be a little broken. So where do you think this is all heading on, kind of a macro and a micro scale? Like, what do you think the go-to-market hiring landscape is going to look like in 2 to 3 years? We've talked about this a little bit with RevOps, but just maybe generally what we're going to start seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can see where it's one of these things where I can see where it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to get there, and so I'm spending whether I drive that change or somebody else does is like fascinating for me. But at a fundamental level, if you think about it, we've got this fun slide. I think you and I and Chris have all talked about it before, which is there are kind of 8 things. So like who you are and what you've done, every recruiter can pull off of LinkedIn. But the real data to make the right matches is in the candidate's head. What drives you? How are you deciding on these rules? What is your superpower? Like who vouches for you? Where are you at in the search? Those types of things. And so like we have built AI where people can come on in and share that. And so you can imagine a scenario where like if candidates are candid and the company that they're candid with respects their confidentiality and their privacy, you can start to do amazing things. And so I see that world. AI is changing every function, but it can't fix recruiting until it has what's in candidates' heads. And so that's a problem that I've been thinking a lot about. I haven't fully solved it yet. We've tried 2 things. We've got a 3rd thing, which we're insanely excited about that's launching soon. And so for us, we're just playing with AI and understanding and seeing. I think it's going to be one of the slower ones to change because most recruiters and most talent teams are way behind where GTM teams are on this. There's a couple that are just way at the forefront. I'm talking to one right after this call, but most aren't. And so I see this world under which it's going to change, but it's going to be incredibly messy as it changes over the next couple of years as well too.
Messy, I think, is the word of the year. All right, cool. Last question we're going to wrap up with. So for a founder or revenue leader walking away from this very conversation that we've had this fine Thursday morning, what's one thing you'd want them to do differently in the next week, either in how they're hiring, how they're thinking through AI fluency, or how they're thinking through their team?
I mean, I think you should get as fluent as you possibly can, because if you aren't, you won't be able to ask the right questions. B, you should probably fundamentally rethink your funnel, both the top of funnel and then the bottom of the funnel in terms of the case study, as we talked about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy, for the time. It was so great speaking with you. And I know anyone listening to this is going to learn a ton.
I am privileged to have been one of your first 5. You are an amazing interviewer. This podcast is going to be awesome.
Oh, thank you, Andy. You're my fave. This conversation with Andy has been so valuable, and I think what made it land is that everything he's shared feels real based on his conversations with go-to-market leaders rather than some theoretical crystal ball gazing. If you're listening and you want to go deeper on what Andy's building at Whispered or check out the Whispered Hiring podcast, we'll have everything linked in the show notes. And if this episode was useful, share it with someone in your network who's navigating the same questions. That's exactly who we made it for. We'll see you next time on Human First.